we need to stop being naive. There are many challenges that are coming our way, especially on the continent and in this country. I think I have the perfect answer, not because it comes from me, but it's the answer people need to hear.
KK Diaz, episode 13 of the C.Cast. I know that you are a business strategist, an author, philanthropist.
I was one of the first Black consultants at Pastel. I actually started out at 9 years old selling sweets, candy. We've worked with over 2,000 businesses in the last 10 years. So there are a bunch of opportunities, but that doesn't matter, and it shouldn't matter to you or anyone else. Here's what needs to matter to everyone that's listening. People got to lead each other. Each one of those team members you spoke about in the Bokke, they are leaders in themselves. That if people were going to build a statue with your name on it, what do you want that statue to say? And I'm saying it without being shy. I want people like you to achieve prosperity, because the more people like you achieve prosperity, the more problems we can solve together.
Hey, I'm Josh Dillon. So, first of all, I just wanted to thank you for taking the time to watch this episode. Before we jump into the next podcast, I just want to take a quick moment to explain to you why we started the KreatorCast. 4 years ago, I founded a company with the goal of connecting Africa to the digital economy and the world to Africa. Over time, we realized that this challenge was a lot greater than what we had expected. In order for us to achieve this vision, it required something extremely important: community. It takes a village. That's why we started the KreatorCast, to create a space where we can interview and profile the members of our community and share how they are connecting themselves to the economy and others too. So that's how the KreatorCast became a thing. We made this podcast with the hope of illuminating what is possible for our people and inspiring you to join the African wave yourself. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what this vision is, but I'm going to tell you at the end of the podcast, and I'm going to let you know how you can get involved too. Until then, let's hop onto the wave. Let's start this journey of elevating Africa. It's a pleasure having you here. Let's get into it.
KK Diaz, episode 13 of the C.Cast. It's an absolute pleasure having you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Josh. It's great to be here, man. I'm always, I guess I'm always on the same seat, but playing the other role, yeah? Interviewing people. It's always great now and again to get interviewed. So I appreciate it, man.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming. I'm really keen to engage with you in the spirit of Global Entrepreneurship Week. That's going to be the focus for today. I know that this is the first time you're featuring on the C.Cast, so I wanted to just give our audience just a little bit of a background in terms of who KK is. I know that you are a business strategist, an author, philanthropist. You have a deep focus on current and forward-looking initiatives rather than dwelling on the past. And I'm really excited to delve into that conversation today, because a lot of what we do is centered around the creative and tech space. And this space is constantly moving at a rapid pace. So when we start thinking about the future, it becomes really exciting, because what we have today is not anything compared to what we're going to have tomorrow. So I'm really excited for us to chat about where we are today and what we can expect from tomorrow. But before we get into all of that, I just wanted to give the audience a little bit of an idea in terms of who KK is. So I wanted to just ask you, KK, in terms of where you're at. I mean, you're the founder of A-Game Business Consulting, which focuses in the digital marketing space. And I know that you've dipped your toes into the tech space, into different areas. But we were actually talking about it now before we started the recording, about how you actually started out in the music space. So how did you get from music, being an executive producer, to making your way into the digital world that you find yourself in today?
Thank you, man. Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you. It's whenever I get an opportunity to look back, it's great to self-reflect, because it kind of helps you to then see where you are and to look forward. Yeah. So I appreciate that. Just in your intro, the only other thing I would add is that I'm a single dad. So I live with my six-year-old daughter. And it's something we can touch on later on, because I think, especially for entrepreneurs and business executives, is that sometimes we find it difficult to kind of manage personal and business, at least a life, get that balance. But I'm proud to say, as busy as I am, I can still make time at home and, make lunch for my daughter, wake her up and get her ready for school and so on. But anyway, just in terms of where I actually started out at 9 years old, selling sweets, candy, in primary school, with my cousin Vincent, who's unfortunately his life has taken a completely different and slightly less positive, I guess, outcome than I did. But he's still my cousin. We hang out now and again, and it's an experience I'll always appreciate. But we started out selling candy, and it just became something that I then started doing myself, when I went back to live with my parents again, because I'd lived with Vincent and his family, who's my cousin, and his mom being my aunt, for about 3 years. And then when I moved back to live with my both my parents, because my mom had been doing her college degree to become a teacher. Coincidentally, she's retiring now, so we're talking entrepreneurship plans for her for next year. So it's an interesting one. But back to the journey, and in my early teens and later on in life, I started selling T-shirts. I sold perfume, so cologne, men and women's cologne. And this was me at 11, 12. And I didn't realize what I was doing until I was 21, that this is what's called entrepreneurship. And I still have doubts whether that is actually entrepreneurship, just from a technical definition perspective. Because as we know, there are so many different definitions. I then fell in love with music, like many of us when we were young, and I wanted to try a hand at in music. And I met some friends in Benoni when we moved to Benoni. I grew up in the East Rand, by the way, Kuruleni and Duduza. So shout out to my fam out there, friends grew up with. I still have friends that I've been friends with for over 3 decades. Yeah, some people are not that old as yet, so it's always something to reflect on. But the entrepreneurship thing kind of took a back seat when I went, obviously, high school, later stage in high school, music. But looking back, I realized that was also entrepreneurial. We needed to raise money as kids to go and get and book studio recordings. We knew nothing about the equipment. Yes, we did get taken for a ride, but it was predominantly positive. I dabbled in music, and then I realized it's something I not only loved, but I saw that the artists around me were struggling. To make sense of projects, to make sense of a process. How do I record? Where do I record? Sometimes you get treated like nonsense when you go to people's studios. I mean, some of these industries that are not as professional, things tend to go a bit haywire very quickly. I then started the record label on those bases. I was one of the first Black consultants at Pastel Payroll back in the day before it became Sage. That's where I learned my trade, not only as a marketer, but as a digital transformation consultant, right? And then maybe later on in the discussion, I'll share how it kind of then got narrowed into what we call digital marketing today, which doesn't do justice to my trade, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And then I left Pastel after about 3 years of working with them. But in between, I also had a mobile pizza business at a jazz international club, which was great. And coincidentally, we're not recording, but we are marketing one of the jazz legends, Uprakaya Mahlangu. I'm actually going to be interviewing him on Friday. So I'll share the podcast with you. Yeah.
Awesome.
Just sorry, to get to the answer, the final answer at least. I then failed in the record label completely. I was married, got divorced. Things got really bad around that time. I had met Alon Reyes about a year before. And so because I had been doing such a great job as a consultant for Sage, even when I was in studio, people would call me, clients who knew me, and they really just wanted to work with me. They didn't even want to call Pastel or Sage at the time. Pastel at the time. And I was like, if my record label is going under, I might as well, just continue with the other business, which I then registered at that point. And that's the long story, I guess, of A Game Business, how it came to be. I had a little contract with the National Youth Development Agency, where I would do payroll, HR, and accounting services for SMEs. And then it just became this consultancy today that is now focusing on growth hacking, digital transformation, and then digital marketing. Yeah. But that's my story.
That's a phenomenal story. And I see why we get along so well is because that creative origin. And I think one of the essential ingredients that comes with being an entrepreneur is being creative, because you have to
Yeah.
come up with new ideas, with new solutions. You have to innovate.
Yeah.
And the moment you start doing that, you're delving into the realms of creativity, thinking of something that doesn't actually exist and creating something new that solves problems. Something that you mentioned now that I really like relate to is that thing of, like, you mentioned that you got taken for a ride a few times by some of the studios.
Yeah.
And bring that back to the whole being a single father thing, you know, when you becoming a child, when you are a child and you're growing up, you know, sometimes when you're trying to learn how to ride a bike, you're going to fall a few times, right?
Of course.
Every time you fall, you learn something new from that experience. And you kind of touched on that a little bit, but I wanted to find out from you, like, being a father, I'm sure right now, as you see your daughter grow up, you see her going through these different lessons, and you see her maybe falling off her bike every now and again.
Yeah.
How has you being a father kind of shaped your unique perspective and your approach when it comes to business and life?
Wow. You know what, to be honest with you, I can't tell you consciously, right? Because I'd never thought about it that way. At least consciously. My eldest son is 21. Well, he's 20. In my head, he's already 21. He's been 21 for like 3 years already. So from my marriage, right? So I've been a father for quite a while, for as long. I have 3 kids. My youngest is a boy who's 4. I want to touch on 2 things. I have fallen so many times on that bike you're talking about. I fell a couple of times this year, right? And I think one of the things that entrepreneurs need to embrace is that you're going to keep falling off that bike. And it's not just entrepreneurs, it's in life, you know. I've got failed relationships, both in business and at work, and I still make mistakes to this day because I'm human, you know what I mean? But I've learned so much. And that's why I continue to learn, so that I can help others not to make the same mistakes that I made. On the matter of, just one little takeaway with the failure, you know, to kind of put people at rest, a little bit, at least mentally, right, is you have to sometimes plan your failures, okay? You have to do enough things in order to fail at some of them, because if you're not doing that, you're not creating enough, as you said earlier, right? You're not testing enough. You're not putting out new products in the market out there that you can then, see if a particular customer segment may dislike what you do, gives you an opportunity to reshape it, to refine it, take it back to market and test. So, we'll just see it as a failure because it wouldn't have hit the market. And then we have to go back and, reiterate and so on. And in some cases, we have to pivot completely. But as a father, I've always wanted to be a family man, to have my own family, to have my own kids. And I actually don't know where that comes from, because I do come from a fairly well put together family. Though my parents did get divorced in my first or second year of varsity, I still love both of them. And, I moved to Soweto a year ago to be close to my mom and so on, amongst many other reasons, and to contribute back into the community. And my daughter's mom is in the area as well. So it's a win-win. We both get our mommies, close by. But I think it's definitely shaped who I am today all around, right? Because I go into businesses now thinking what I've been preaching for many years to businesses as a digital transformation consultant, to say, why are you not letting your people work at home? Why do you need them to be at the office? These people have families. They've got kids. Some of them are single mothers, right? And of course, there are single dads out there too, who don't necessarily have the support to be able to show up at work as and when, every day, whatever the case may be. But look, many of them can show up, but it's not necessarily what they want to do, right? They want to work from home. They want to spend time with their kids, with their family. Why don't you as a business allow them that freedom, and allow them to be the best versions of themselves at work? Because if you give people an opportunity to have and to do what they love around them, things can only get better, I think, at least, right? And so as a dad, I think that contributes quite a lot in terms of how I still consult and speak to business leaders. I mean, I've literally just finished another ebook now on 8 steps of strategy development. And one of the things in there speaks to creativity, embracing failure, and allowing people to work from home, because I work from home. When my daughter comes from home, daddy's home, she leaves, I'm here, it gives me a very good feeling to be able to do that. And I know many more people want that. So it's affected me in that way, not only as an entrepreneur myself, who wants to do things that are responsible, that provide value to customers and communities. But I think even as an employer, I want the best for my team members who are essentially based around the country. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And as you're speaking, I'm seeing these different frameworks of thinking coming to the foreground. And I'm really excited to see where we land up by the end of this podcast, because in my mind, what we're doing here is we're building a blueprint. And ultimately, you mentioned one of your ebooks. I had a look at some of your other books, and I see that you've authored 7 books. I mean, that's quite a substantial amount of books to have written. And each book that I look at, and when I look at the different topics that are covered, each of these topics are forming a part of a bigger blueprint, which I know as the A-game business blueprint. So I wanted to find out this bigger blueprint that we see and that you are building up here. What kind of impact has this blueprint had on modern businesses, especially in Africa?
So, I mean, I'd love to say that there's been tens of thousands of businesses that have gone through our blueprint. That's actually not the case. But the few hundred that have, we've worked with over 2,000 businesses in the last 10 years. And most of them do go through the blueprint without even realizing it, because it's at the essence of what we do, right? And in terms of what types of businesses, I mean, anywhere from your average tech startup, all the way to business schools, I'll openly say this because Professor Benny Anderson, who was one of the founders and next CEO of the Da Vinci Institute, we work with them on enterprise and supply development, supporting small businesses, but they too were a client of ours as a university business school. And so we were able to then implement these tactics and strategies, not only with universities, but with, in certain instances with business units at banks, with multi-billion rand annual turnover companies that have got units that they either want to start up or they want to grow in some way. We worked with 40 entrepreneurs in Khayelitsha for about 6 months earlier this year. Who else? And yeah, I mean, just about any contact we have with clients. So that 2,000 that we've worked with in some form or shape have been touched or impacted by the A-Game Business Blueprint. And those who've read the book understand the journey that they need to travel, which provides a great sense of confidence and courage as well, to understand that if I have a map to follow, if I have a blueprint to build a house, it's that much easier. The same thing happens with a business. I know for many, many years, and I bet you today there's somebody saying there isn't a formula to business. Ours is, we could say it's a formula of some sort, but it's not like you've got very specific things that will give you specific results. It's about following a particular roadmap, that blueprint. That's what the blueprint is for, to give you guidance on what you could do as you build the business, especially for those who are not as experienced. But our content, our frameworks, they tend to be a little more sophisticated than the average person that's starting out. But if you have context for business, you've worked somewhere, those kind of things, then much of what we do and say and teach and guide then becomes quite easy to understand and implement. So yeah.
And I would say it's not even like a road map as you described. The way I see it is more of a philosophy in a way, because with a road map, you certain directions that you need to take, right? So
True.
you go down this road, you take a right, then you take a left. But that's not necessarily how life works, especially in entrepreneurship space. The way I see it is the roads are constantly shifting.
Yeah.
They're constantly moving and changing. So it's having a roadmap isn't as useful as having more of a philosophy. And as you're speaking, I'm starting to see how this philosophy is becoming more and more clearer, right? So I think one of the things that we mentioned earlier was that thing of failing and not being afraid to fail. So one of the things that you kind of need to do, and you touched on it earlier, you were saying that, you know, you can kind of plan your failures. And that comes along with philosophy, because what I'm getting from what you're saying is that a part of that planning is actually pushing yourself. It's pushing the envelope in different spaces and growing yourself and taking risks and leaps. Because when you try something new for the first time, chances are you're going to fail. But you have that confidence. And by having that kind of philosophy that you get from the book, it's teaching people, okay, this is what's going to happen. This is what you need to do in order to grow your business. And when you can see the success, and this is why we do this podcast, is it's very difficult for a young person or anyone who's entering the entrepreneurial space to take that leap, because it's a scary thing. You know, it's not an easy thing to do. You don't know what the outcome's going to be. You don't know what to do or where to go. You might not have people that you can speak to. And that's why it's so important for us to have these conversations, to show the success of what happens when you do take those risks and when you take those leaps. Because by sharing those stories, it shows you that, you know, you're not alone. There's other people out there that are also pushing, that are very much aligned with what you're doing, that are also struggling and still learning to this day. You mentioned you've got 30 years experience under your belt. You're still learning today, just as much as I am. And you're not alone, you know? So that's why we do this podcast. And it's really just to kind of like get a sense of what your philosophy is and share that with the world. And I can see this picture becoming more and more clearer. I know that you've also, like you mentioned, you've worked with 2,000 businesses. So you have a lot of experience working with various entrepreneurs, managers, CEOs, et cetera, that are all innovating within the African market. Based off of that experience, what unique opportunities do you see on the horizon when it comes to looking towards the future?
Who is this question for? Is it for me, or is it just for people in general?
I mean, it would be for anyone. I mean, if you're listening to this, I'd like to hear your thoughts, but specifically, what opportunities can you see? Because right now, what we're doing is we're talking about looking forward, right? I mean, one of the quotes that I found that you have mentioned before is, you can't build a forward-looking business while looking into the rearview mirror.
100%.
So how do you look, when you're looking forward, what do you see on the horizon that people can start preparing for today? Because if you think about the audience listening to this, there's a lot of entrepreneurs, leaders in business, and maybe just people who are interested in tech that want to, and creativity, that want to learn how to leverage these things to build businesses themselves. So being someone that's in the digital space that specializes with transformation, has experience working with so many businesses, you're the perfect person to ask this question to, in terms of like, what is along the horizon?
I think I have the perfect answer, not because it comes from me, but it's the answer people need to hear. And the reason I was asking you, is this my question, or is it just is it predominantly for the general public, right? And general public, I'm talking entrepreneurs, obviously the audience. And I'll give you both answers if you don't mind.
Yeah.
It is, you know, life is very interesting. Just yesterday, I've been pursuing the client who's now become a partner, and we are actually now going together into investing in 2 other businesses together, but I also get to invest in his. So now I'm using traditional principles to do business in the future, currently and in the future. So the opportunities that exist for someone in my position is fairly different to the ones that are that would typically exist for, say, an entrepreneur that's starting out, or a business executive that wants to grow their business, and so on. Context matters quite a bit, right? That's for me. I have like unimaginable. At least for me, I couldn't imagine the amount of opportunities I have today. And I mean, I'm playing around with AI. I've been for the last year, and we've integrated into 2 apps. We've been working on these ideas for a couple of years now. We did soft launches of both of them. We're going to continue to search to search for new customers, and of course raise funds and so on. So there are a bunch of opportunities for me. They've across the spectrum, doing business overseas, doing a little bit more business locally, because now we can do things a lot cheaper for predominantly those who cannot afford the certain privileges that some of us can, and so on. So there are a bunch of opportunities. But that doesn't matter, and it shouldn't matter to you or anyone else. Here's what needs to matter to everyone that's listening. I've had the privilege of working with amazing people, and one of them is Henning Duprier. Henning Duprier got a great opportunity to work with Eli Goldratt. Eli Goldratt is the guy who came up with the concept called theory of constraints. Famous book that came out in the mid-'80s. I would highly recommend anyone to read, because you can apply it across the spectrum from industry, problems, and so on. Theory of constraints, Eli Goldratt. Now, one of the things that I learned from Henning, and it just blows my mind each time I hear it, is this. Each and every product and solution that you see existing today is merely the best way that someone or a group of people have found as a way to cope with a problem. It's not necessarily the best way to solve that problem. What that means is every problem we're solving today, there's an opportunity to do it better. So you as an entrepreneur looking for something, or a business that's looking to start a new business unit, merely look at what problem you're solving. It could even be a problem in another industry or whatever the case may be. Look at how it's being resolved right now, how it's being solved, and implement innovation techniques and tactics and strategies in order to see how you can solve that problem 10 times. Now, I'm going to ask you this. How many problems do we have in the world today?
Too many, way too many.
That's how many opportunities there are, to answer your question.
Yeah. And I want to let that marinate for a bit, because a lot of the time we look at these problems, and especially in South Africa, I always say this, we're dealing with so many issues, and it's always in our face. I mean, right now, one of the things that we're looking at is like war that's happening across the world. And there's a lot of, we get constantly getting beat down by these things.
Mm-hmm.
And just as much as it's a problem, there is also an opportunity. And I always relate this back to creativity, because if we look at like South Africans, I believe South Africans have some sort of secret sauce, and you see it in certain areas, right? Whether it be a Trevor or whether it be an Uncle Waffles or whoever, people that are going abroad and dominating different spaces as South Africans that have come from this environment of load shedding and crime and corruption can still go and dominate on a global platform. And it's so important that we actually have a deeper look into that, because why is that the case? My theory on it is that, because we have so many constraints and limitations, essentially are operating in a box. We need to be able to do the same as what people can do in first world countries, but we don't have as many resources. We have to deal with it. We have to think about crime. We have to think about all these things. And because we have these constraints, we have to overcome so much more just to operate on the same level as those that are coming from first world countries. And for me, that's where our secret sauce comes from, because we are doing the same thing, not maybe even better. And the reason why is because we have to be creative in how we overcome these problems we're facing. We're forced to do it. And that is our competitive edge. One thing that you mentioned now as well was how you had learned this concept from someone else, right? And when it comes to business, one thing that I'm learning is that in order to scale the business, in order to achieve big things, you cannot go alone. You need to go together with a group of people.
100%.
And that's why I love these podcasts, because I learn so much. I get the opportunity to speak with people that have so much experience, and selfishly, I get to learn from that. And I really appreciate that opportunity. And I'm going to be a little bit more selfish right now, because one of the challenges that I've been struggling with over the last 2 years building my business is this thing of nurturing high performance teams. So I don't know, it's me, someone that has this kind of issue, like how do you adjust? What kind of approach do you take? What is your philosophy when it comes to building a high performance team?
Great question. Great problem. So my book right here, A-Game Business Blueprint, actually helps with that problem too. And the reason why I earlier I spoke to the idea of a roadmap is because it literally starts putting steps you got to take in place. And I'm going to share one with you now that speaks to you specifically, right? Because I've had the pleasure of speaking to you earlier. Last week we've interacted on LinkedIn, and there's certain things I can see because I have context now for certain things, which I'm going to share with you. One of them is I've had the opportunity to learn and be, and be guided. And I've since been accredited to then become a facilitator of this thing I'm going to share with you now. And it's called natural energy, natural talent. I'm sure you can easily see that you are fairly creative, outgoing, and you don't have a problem talking to people, right? There's a natural energy, natural talents that you have that other people don't have, right? And therefore, the need for you to build a team that will help take you to the next level is about doing certain things right and avoiding other things. One of the things that you need to avoid first, that you need to work on, is to avoid hiring people like you.
Okay, interesting take.
Right? One of the biggest things you're going to fall for are other people like you, because they resemble who you are, but they are not necessarily your biggest strength. Your biggest strength are the people who can do things you can't do. And so the first place to start is to profile yourself, your natural energy, and see what strengths and weaknesses you have. Predominantly strengths, of course, because we want to work with our greatest strengths. And then when you hire people, one of the things you got to do is ask questions, leading questions that speak to their natural energy. But the best way to do that is to actually literally ask them to take this test. Okay, there are various tests out there. Strength Finder. We use Contribution Compass. It has 8 profiles, and so it starts to show you on a map, on a heat map of some sort, to say based on questions that you answer, of course, that your energy is somewhat in this kind of quadrant or that particular profile, and it also guides you on, therefore, who are the people you need to hire next in terms of their natural energy. For example, one of the things that, and I'm going to assume here that you and I are fairly similar, right? Because I've seen some of your traits, so to speak. You are creative. Think of people like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, right? Those people didn't start their businesses by themselves. They needed not only technical expertise, right? Which is the other thing, is when you're building a team, who else do you need from a technical expertise perspective? Because me doing marketing is different to someone who's a lot more grounded, who can listen a lot more. I'm not because of where I am, my natural energy is relative to someone who can be a lot more grounded than I am. They might be able to do a much better job than I can. I can start things. I can do the strategy. I can lead the team that's going to execute the strategy. But don't ask me to sit there and do community management for social media. You get what I'm saying? It won't work for me, not because I'm not a junior or because I don't like social media, but it doesn't work with my energy for me to sit with one thing for a very long time. You get what I'm saying? And therefore, to answer your question, when you build your team, there are certain principles that you need to apply, a philosophy. And part of that philosophy, you already have the fundamentals in place that you can't do it alone. But whoever you get next shouldn't just be any random Tembi, Jack, and Mandla. You know what I mean? It has to be people that you are taking through a process of elimination, or process of you choosing them. And one of the filters that help you is, what is your profile? And in your team, where are the gaps? And therefore, when you select teams or individuals that you are going to be interviewing to be part of your team, that's how you kind of eliminate them on your list, is who's the best match. And then you look at attitude as well. You may want to start with attitude first and then kind of invest in determining people's profiles and so on. I mean, that's a very loose way of approaching it. We've got a very precise step-by-step process that you can follow, but that essentially encapsulates what I would recommend that you do as you build your team.
Yeah. It's so true, because when I'm thinking about it now, for example, Pearl's joined us here. She's our resident producer, but she's also been a huge part of what we've been doing within JD Creations over the last 6 months. And when I take what you're saying and I relate it back, because it's been an absolute pleasure with Pearl. She's helped us leverage a lot of the opportunities that have come our way, and without her, we wouldn't be at the level that we're operating right now. And when I'm speaking, I'm just thinking about certain scenarios. So, for example, we were working on a website, and on that website, there was a certain part of the website that required a bit of time to transfer data from one side or from one document onto the website. And for me, like, I've done a lot of these tests and whatnot. And one thing that I've noticed, and it ties into what you're saying, is I suck at repetitive tasks. If I'm doing the same thing over and over again, I absolutely, whenever I have to sit down and do it, I'll procrastinate to to the last minutes that I have available. I'll procrastinate until that minute because I just do not want to do it. And
you probably are the same with admin and accounting,
financials, exactly the same thing. I avoid that thing like plague. And when I was chatting with Pearl, we were working on the website, and she had done that segments for me, or for the client rather. And I was like, how was the experience? How was it? And she was like, no, I absolutely enjoyed it. Like, this is amazing. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. But tying it back to what you're saying, that makes sense, because we're all good at different things, right? So when it comes to building a team, we all play different positions. And I know you love football. I know you're an avid Kaizer Chiefs fan. So tying it to football, for example, there's different roles that we all play. The defender's got to make the striker's got to make the shots. The winger's got to make the pass. The midfielder's got to make the pass. So we all have different roles. We're all good at different things. And that's why it's so important for us to work together. I think one thing that I do notice a lot, and there's a common thread that comes up in a lot of these podcasts, is how, because we operate, like, as I was saying earlier, we operate with constraints and limitations, right? Which is, on one side, really positive because it forces us to be creative. It gives us that South African sauce that I always talk about. There's also a negative side of it that we need to be aware of. And the side that I see is that when you're operating within constraints, it's very easy to adopt a scarcity mindset over an abundance mindset. When you operate in a scarcity mindset, you focus a lot more on competition versus collaboration. So to give you an example, one of our clients in the online learning space, and I've really had a great opportunity to kind of explore that space and see what's happening there. And what I see is that everyone is aligned in terms of they want to solve this learning issue. We have an education challenge, and there's a lot of people out there that are motivated, that are working every day to solve this. But everyone's operating in silos. I think a lot of that comes from that scarcity mindset of competition versus collaboration. So one of the things that I would love to see a lot more of in South Africa and Africa is this collaboration mindset of us working together. And in order for that to happen, you've touched on it now as well, is leadership, right? You need good leaders that are able to bring people together, that are able to identify who's good at what and put them in the place that they need to be. Because when you have that leadership, it brings that level of cohesion amongst people. And it's really like, talking about leadership, we're coming out of the World Cup now, the Rugby World Cup, and something that's a lot of people have been speaking about is Siya Kolisi's leadership, and how he's brought that team together. We won 3 games consecutively with 1 point, and that 1 point did not come from our skills. It didn't come from what we're good at. It came from our mindset and our ability to push through. And I believe that him as a leader, is the reason why we were able to achieve that. And it's such a great thing that happened. I think it's something that we needed, because we have an absence of leadership in our country at the moment. I just want to get your thoughts around that, coming from the perspective of being a coach, having experience in team building. What is your thoughts around this leadership topic? And speaking specifically to entrepreneurs, because like you mentioned, we're going into Entrepreneurship Week. A lot of people that are entrepreneurs have to be leaders. What
Yeah.
can we learn from the likes of Siya Kolisi, and what do we need to see more of in South Africa where we have this vacuum of leadership?
I'm gonna touch on a couple of things to do my best to answer the question, right? Firstly, I'm gonna start off by saying I don't know enough about Sia's leadership style, right? Because much of it happens in the outside of the game, before the games. You get what I'm saying? When you get to the game, yes, there's still quite a bit of leadership that happens there, but that's probably less than 10% of what goes into winning a game. That 90% happens outside of the game. It has to do with how people are treating each other, outside of even practice. We all have problems. The question is, how concerned is the team with the health, longevity, and really the sustainability of each member? And I'm saying sustainability because these guys are trucks, right? And so if they get hurt while practicing, or somebody at home, somebody's family member is not well, it obviously affects the performance of each member. And that one member's inability to perform at their best will easily affect, whatever other team members, and et cetera, right? So I know very little about Sia's leadership, but I know a lot happens outside of what we get to see at the games. And I'm very proud of the Bokke, always have been. And I want to understand a lot more about how people like Sia are doing it. And it would be great to actually have that opportunity to just do a bit of investigating around it, because I am literally writing a leadership book right now, and I've been for about 4 years, and I'm just not ready to put it out yet, because I think there's quite a lot to still to learn. And part of the mistakes I made this year are also around leadership, just to be frank with the audience and with you, of course. All right, so I want to jump to something else. The other thing is, leadership starts at home, right? I'll probably get in trouble with this. I'll see how much I can I can hold back. But after having moved back to the hood, one of the things I wanted to see is why are townships stuck where they are stuck, right? And I remember my I'll call it my other voice said to me this week is, how different are we acting in the community compared to the ANC right now? And I swear to God, I couldn't see a difference. I couldn't see a difference. And sometimes as individuals, we don't see that we are already influencing somebody else's behavior. And so we are already leading. We don't know that. We're not conscious of it. So the parents and the elders, I put myself in that category as well. I'm an elder person because I have kids, right? I mean, the guys here, some of the grown up teenagers and young adults are already calling me Bra KK, which speak to somebody being an elder in the community. And I am realizing that much of the problems that exist in the townships, yes, we've got historical stuff that happened, but much of what's happening is because of a lack of leadership. What's happening with the ANC in government, lack of leadership. You can have a leader, but that leader is very likely not to have great leadership skills and traits, right? But all of us can learn to be leaders. And the other thing that speaks to the problem, there are two other things I want to add to this, and hence I said I'm going to jump around quite a few times to kind of just try and tie this answer down. But what I'm trying to do is to show that there are multiple facets that speak to what leadership is. The other one is this. Again, I'm going to use an example in the hood. There are many tuck shops that are owned by foreigners. Those foreigners work flipping well together. The reason why they work well together is because they've got a constraint, a limitation. If they don't solve that limitation, they're going to die from hunger. They're going to be homeless, etc., etc. They know that. But what do we know about our limitation if we don't have jobs in the country? We know the government is going to do, or we think we know what the government is going to do for us. So we're slightly less determined and less driven to solve the problems that we're facing. And so the township tuck shop owners who are predominantly foreign nationals are thriving in that industry. It's a multi-billion rand annual turnover business and industry that they are coining every year. And much of our people are not. Lack of leadership. But why are they doing well? They're doing well because they have to stick together. They've realized that. Guess what? The very same people, they're not sticking together back home. Right? Take South Africans in smaller groups overseas. They know each other and they're working together and they're helping each other. Are we doing that here? Not to the same degree. So the idea of constraints, survival, courage, and understanding the importance of working with others in order to achieve great success or achieve some success has to do with not only leading yourself, but you have to lead each other, but you have to work together, right? The Bokke are doing an amazing job at working together, right? God forbid, Sia is not captain, he's not there. I think the Bokke will still do well. I'm not taking anything away from him, but I'm saying when people have determined or have got a certain frequency at which they radiate, and a certain understanding. I mean, the Bokke have been kicking ass before Sia, is what I'm trying to say, right? I'm not taking anything away from him. You do need great leaders in order for teams to do greatly, right? But I'm saying there are so many different facets that speaks to what leadership is. Another one is Ubuntu, which we are doing such a terrible job at in this country and on the continent. And that's the idea of specifically working together. We have so many problems in the township where I live, and I'm excited about those problems. But my biggest challenge is actually working with the people who are stuck with those problems. Either they've given up trying to solve those problems, or they lack the confidence in order to understand that they can pursue the solutions and solve those problems. You know, they hate the idea of political parties coming here and, you know, bribing people and, you know, I mean, for example, I know we have water pressure issues over weekends because clearly the infrastructure isn't built in such a way to cater for the people who are, say, inhibiting a particular section. It's a leadership problem, right? Now, the question is, why don't a bunch of parents come together, which is something we are trying. Funny enough, I'm chairman of the committee here at my road, but it was by default. And I told them I'll only be in it for a month until I get a sense of people's intention, right, to solve those problems, etc., etc. I don't want to, for example, one of the things I said is I don't want to lead people who don't want to be led. People got to lead each other. Each one of those team members you spoke about in the Bokke, they are leading themselves. They are leaders in themselves. And so when you get leaders come together, they know that, yo, we got to follow someone else. You know, even as a leader, I got to be a follower at some point myself. And so these are all the different facets that lead to becoming a great leader. But in closing this topic, or this, at least my answer, I'm not saying don't ask me another leadership related question, is something that I read in a book. And a senior gentleman was asked, to cut the long story short, it was in a rural area. The people who were visiting the area asked him, are they great leaders that are born here? And he said, no, only babies are born here, right? That is a smart way of saying anyone can become a leader. You are born as you are. Yes, some people have got a lot more courage, a lot more confidence. It's like sales. It's like entrepreneurship. It's like creativity. We are born with different traits, but we can learn skills. Leadership is both an attitude and a skill that can be learned.
So much there. There's so much. The kind of direction that I'd like to take it in is that box that we were talking about. And I'm going to refer to it as an environment. Yep. Because you mentioned it now, right? Whoever's the leader, whoever's leading, creating that environment. They have the power to make decisions, to create that environment.
Yeah.
And that environment will determine how we operate. So tying it back to what you were saying, the reason why foreign nationals can perform so well here in South Africa, but when they're at home, they're not, is because of that environment. So the environment dictates our actions.
100%.
And the leader dictates our environment. So that's why it's so important, because a lot of young people don't see the purpose of voting. And for me, that is why it is so important that we vote, because the leader that we vote in is the person who's going to determine our environment, and the environment is going to determine how we act as a holistic group.
100%.
I don't think we often think about it that way. We don't make the relation. We just think that these decisions that are being made, they just happen and then we just live, you know, like, no, it has a huge impact. It has a huge impact.
It does. Can I add something to that? Sorry, Josh. Let me just add something to that. One of the reasons people who are on drugs will typically go to a drug rehab, come back clean, but go back to drugs is because of the environment.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So environment is very powerful in terms of determining success, determining the extent at which a community or a people can either fail or thrive. Yeah. So I totally agree with you.
And think about it in a practical sense. If you're waking up every day and you're going on the streets and there's sewage all over the streets, that affects your mentality.
Crime, suffering, right?
Yes.
Yeah, right. I mean, if you look at some of the landscapes, just the environment around where I stay, I mean, it's way better than most of Soweto, but you can still see, as you say, I can still see how it affects people. Certain aspects will affect people, right? You're talking about sewers, you're talking about blown pipes, things like that. And the biggest thing that I am seeing is hopelessness. The environment can do that to a person, and then they stop, and then they do nothing, and they just wait for the end. It's very sad.
Well, we've got got 10 minutes left of this podcast, and I see it as an opportunity, 10 minutes to start painting a picture of hope.
It's fantastic.
Tying it back to that topic, right? The leader creates the environment dictates our overall actions as a group of people. It comes back to that self-leadership, right? Because at the end of the day, we all need to lead something, right? We were all created to lead. Whether it's leading yourself, or whether it's leading a group of people, whether it's leading a country or rugby team. At some point, you're going to have to lead something. But leadership, like you said, it starts at home. And before it even starts with your brother, your sister, your mother, your cousin, it starts with you, right?
Totally.
Choices that you make. So coming back to that topic of leadership, ultimately, I think we all want to see a greater future. We all want to see a better South Africa. A lot of us are dealing with, like you said, being demotivated and not believing in a brighter future. What do we do to show that brighter future as individuals? When we're leading ourselves, how do we paint a brighter future as individuals?
For ourselves.
For ourselves. And yes, I'm a firm believer that as you fill your cup to the point where it's at the brim, when you're filling it, it starts to overflow. That point, it can start to overflow into the lives of others. Yeah. And maybe we bring this, I would like you to answer from the framework of entrepreneurs that are within Entrepreneurship Week that might be struggling. Yeah. How do we as entrepreneurs paint this picture of a brighter future?
Let me try and answer it this way, by drawing into what I know and have lived over the last 2, maybe 3 decades of my life. Kind of consciously understanding this thing we call entrepreneurship. One is this: entrepreneurship is a lifestyle. It's not a role, right? And I always say this: you can be entrepreneurial without being an entrepreneur, because it's a lifestyle. And so one of the things I want to celebrate and push next week and observe is precisely that. You can be entrepreneurial without being an entrepreneur, first and foremost. So it's about understanding principles like that. And probably the next most important one is have you, like, how woke are you? How conscious are you? I hardly use the word woke. I'm just using it because I think the audience will understand better. I use the word conscious, which I've touched on a few times. How conscious are you of yourself on this earth? And therefore, what have you chosen? And I'm using the word chosen with intent. What have you chosen to be your purpose? What are you here to achieve? What are you here to do? That's what people got to go back to. What do I want to leave behind on this earth? You know, and when you plan, don't plan for 5 years, at least for yourself. Plan for the next 100 and maybe even 1,000 years, right? That if people were going to build a statue with your name on it, what do you want that statue to say? What do you want the placard on that statue to say? That's the one question you got to ask yourself. That'll help you see beyond anything. It's beyond your products and services. It's about what kind of impact you want to have in the world. How many people do you want to touch, right? And sometimes it is merely about helping other people, right? My job, my purpose is to help people like you, Josh, to become the best entrepreneur that you can become and to become the wealthiest person you can become. And I'm saying it without being shy. I want people like you to achieve prosperity, because the more people like you achieve prosperity, the more problems we can solve together. So in answering your question, people should look at what their purpose is beyond their businesses, beyond their products, because sometimes that can help lead you in where you actually need to be. And in some cases, it's not about you running your own business. It's about you going to join a Josh, going to join a Michael or Tembi or someone else who's running a business. Going back to one of the first questions you asked around team, right? I think some of us are pushing the narrative or the agenda that people should start businesses. I particularly don't promote that. You know, I think it's a little irresponsible, and I'll tell you why. Because it's easy to start, right? And normally the people who say start are not there to guide you and to help you through those failures that we know you're going to get, right? But more importantly, the reason I say that is I've always had an idea about that. But then I heard what Elon Musk said, and he said, you never need to tell an entrepreneur to start a business. They already have one, right? Or they are on the way of starting one. And the more of those kind of people that we have starting businesses and we support them, the greater the success we will have. I'm not going to discourage anyone to start a business, right? But if you're looking for encouragement, don't go on with that business. You know what I mean? And I'm not being facetious here. I'm saying if you are someone who are constantly needing to be motivated, maybe you shouldn't be there. Some of those people need to make those decisions. Every day those decisions are being made is, should I continue or not? There's nothing wrong with stopping and doing something else. But look inward, look at your purpose, look at what it is that you truly would want to do. Your purpose is not going to come from somewhere, from someone else. You are going to choose it. So, and there are processes. You can go online, you can check videos. If you want help, reach out. I'm more than happy to kind of guide you. We've got documents and things we can send you. And videos, you know, there are videos online. There's a 5-minute video, a TED Talk. I think it's about 7 minutes. A TED Talk that helps people to answer those questions. And then align yourself and see if this is my purpose. Am I in the right business? Right? Because you're going to find a lot of creatives, a lot of people who can code starting businesses, but they know nothing about leading people. Right? They know nothing about sales and marketing and so on. So if you are that person, shouldn't you be building an app with somebody else? Ask yourself those questions. Purpose is key. I think for me, that's been the biggest revelation in terms of where I am today. And I could be anywhere and I'll know what it is that I do. I know what it is that I came on this earth to fulfill, right? It's the biggest kind of pillar of strength that I have. And it's something nobody can ever take away from me.
Once you determine your why, you will then be able to determine your how.
Totally.
And there are millions of problems, but with those problems come millions of opportunities. And
Totally.
if you want to capitalize on those opportunities, it starts with you leading yourself.
100%.
And if you can master that, that is how you're going to be able to bring about change in this world. Thank you so much, KK. This has been an insightful conversation. I really appreciate your time, and I've learned a lot. You've shifted my perspective on quite a few things, and yeah, for that, I'm eternally grateful. I don't know if there's any last things that you'd like to say before we wrap up.
Maybe two things. One is the book I was talking about. That's actually what I was checking on the phone earlier. Eli Goldrad's book is called The Goal. It's actually written in a feeble type style, so you can just listen to it like it's a story. The last thing is we need to stop being naive. There are many challenges that are coming our way, especially on the continent and in this country. And we need to be, as much as we want to be aspirational and inspired and looking forward, we also got to be realistic, right? We got to do our SWOT analysis. Yes, we've got strength, but we also unfortunately have weaknesses, and we touched on some of those. In closing, look at those weaknesses as well and see how you can de-risk them, right? How you can mitigate those risks. So that it further boosts your probability of success. Because sometimes we leave ourselves to be vulnerable in spots that we shouldn't have. And sometimes it has to do because my profile is this way, I think that way. And so there are certain things I don't think about. We have vulnerabilities as much as we have strength. So we need to find a way of plugging those in, finding ways to partner with people, and finding ways to be sustainable while doing that. So that'll be the last thing I say. And thanks again for the opportunity, Josh. It's been an interesting conversation. And here's the thing: we didn't speak about marketing once, yeah?
Well, no, I don't. Marketing is the how. Marketing is the how.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Precisely.
And I think as young entrepreneurs that want to uplift Africa and South Africa specifically, we need to start with the why. And I think that's what we're on today.
100%. It's about the belief. It's about the philosophy. It's about vision. It's about where we are going and with whom are we going there. You know, one of the best African proverbs is, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go with others. And so it encapsulates exactly what you're saying. It's not about product. It's not about service. Hence, I said we didn't speak about marketing once, because business, entrepreneurship is about so much more about other things than it is about the products and services that we are providing in the market. And thanks again for the opportunity, man. Appreciate it.
Great reminder. So if you want to go somewhere far and you're looking for people to join you on that journey, we're here. Join the Creator community. Follow us. Check out KK Diaz on LinkedIn or on Instagram. He's got amazing stuff out there. And also subscribe to our channel. Follow us. You can go onto our Instagram, or you could go onto our LinkedIn as well. I am Josh Dillons, where you can find me specifically. KK, is there anywhere else you'd like to direct people before we cut off?
Oh, the website, agamebusiness.com, the easiest place to kind of find what we do. There are tons of resources there that people can find, digital marketing reports, ebooks, webinars, things like that. So yeah, agamebusiness.com. Thanks, Josh.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Once again, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. My hope is that we have illuminated what is possible for you. My hope is that we've inspired you to start your journey of elevating Africa in the global space. It is possible. At the beginning of this podcast, I mentioned the African wave. This is it. We are creating a platform for the elevation of Africa in the global space. If you want to join this wave, but you're not too sure where to start, I'd like to encourage you to find out more about the Creator community. Our community is founded on 3 pillars: coaching, connecting, and culture. Through these pillars, we hope to create a point of convergence for future leaders of Africa. If you are a leader and you want to be a part of this movement, please visit our website. You'll find courses of finding your online voice and see when our next networking event is coming up. We're excited for you to join our journey in connecting Africa to the digital economy. But until then, we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for watching.